It wouldn't be worth doing if it weren't terrifying.
Exactly.
Yeah, right? Going into outer space is terrifying.
Yes.
If it's not risky, then I might as well be taking a nap, I guess is what I
And
would say.
look, no shade on naps. We love them.
No, 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 no. Lo, I love naps.
What if that's the headline from this? Pinckney hates naps. Because I've just gone on an incredible ride that you're about to go on listening to this episode. We have Pinckney Benedict. And before you wonder, yes, he talks about his name. He's a professor at Southern Illinois University. He is a fiction writer. He is the head of the Center for Virtual Expression at the university, which means he's a futurist. He loves to think about how things work today, informed by so many things before. He is an incredible delight to chat with. I hope you all get the pleasure at some point of interacting with Pinckney. I will say some of the key takeaways for me, especially around change. So, listen to this episode thinking about changes you're going through right now at home, at work. I know you're scared. Pinckney's going to make you feel excited about it. And I think that's a really remarkable thing. He's also going to talk to us about being strange. You've heard some other episodes that we've had about inviting and evoking, what makes you unique, what are your hobbies, and let's not let those fall by the wayside. So I think the invitation in today's episode is giggle along with me, brace yourself, hold on, because it's going to be a ride, and have fun with us. Fun, Pinky and I both agree on this, it's not negotiable. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode. Has writing always been fun, and how important is fun?
Well, fun is everything. I mean, if you're
Yes.
going to do something, you know, productively for your entire life, it had better be fun. Because we're not good at doing things we don't enjoy. Or, I mean, I certainly am not. I discovered early on that storytelling was just a blast, that it's fun to make up worlds and people enjoy them. And, I mean, I guess it's the equivalent of being the guy who shows up at the campfire beer party with his guitar and sings, Dust in the Wind or whatever. But it's, you've got a skill that you can deploy that means that, people aren't entirely regretful when you show up, and everybody loves stories. I mean, that's the thing. Like,
Mm.
people always say they want information. People always say they want facts and figures and, that kind of thing. What everybody wants is a story. What everybody wants is drama and, a sense of change that's happening as events take place. People are changing and responding to those events, and you're trying to decide, are they responding well, are they responding poorly, what would I do in that situation? And there's just nowhere that's not welcome, or at least that's been my what I've discovered as I've gone along.
Would you describe any of your time on this earth as counterculture in any way?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of counter.
I don't know why I'm so giggly. Jeez
I like
Louise.
it. I
I'm having
Yeah,
fun.
that's crazy, right? I mean, to have a job where you enjoy yourself and, the results are good, and yeah, it's nuts. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've been counter almost everything I've ever done. I mean, I grew up on a dairy farm, but I was clumsy, and the cattle scared me, and every time I got on a tractor, I wrecked things. And so you're on a dairy farm, and people say, well, what do you think you're going to do with your life? Well, I'm going to write short stories. well, that's a, you know, my family very accepting and that kind of thing, but clearly not. It was out of the ordinary for my family. So I was pretty used to growing up, sort of counter whatever culture I was in, and when I went to college, that was where I discovered, I go to this, sophisticated college full of brilliant people, and that's where first of all, I hadn't realized, that I had an accent or that I was a redneck or anything like that. But you get to Princeton, and so I indulged that part of how I grew up on in West Virginia and that kind of thing, because I'm in classes with Kirill of Saxe Coburg and people like that. And so I'm pretty counter that. And then I got into academia, but I'm the least professorial person you'll ever meet. It's strange to me to be a professor, to be a teacher. Like I love teaching, but sort of the whole thing that goes with professor just seems bizarre to me. I'm just kind of a fat bald dude at the front of the room, and so it's so it's when I'm offered leadership positions and administrative stuff, I hate it so bad. Like, turning in receipts is just one of these things that every normal person can do, and they're successful, and they go on into administration and they run things, and running CVEX is very strange. Like, that's the highest administrative post I will ever seek or will ever accept if it's offered to me, because I do not have the administrative touch. So I don't know that I'm counterculture, in a kind of 1960s hippie burning the flag kind of way, but I'm not what I've been strange in every environment I've ever been.
Is that now not strange to be the one who's strange for you? Like, is it just sort of like, look, my name's Pinckney,
Well,
so
right. I mean,
let's start with that.
that's the whole thing. You grow up Pinckney Benedict, and
Yeah.
it's a blessing. Sometimes it's a curse. Other times it means you're easily memorable for good or bad. No one. You're not going to run into yourself coming and going. Right. You'll be the first person, first name of Pinckney, that most people have met. Yeah, so no, I mean, it's not, and it's not even a choice. Like, I don't mean to say, oh, I come in and and I just, I'll fight anybody or whatever. It's just, yeah, I'm a peculiar individual, and there's not much I can do about it. And so yeah, I just go along, and you try to take the good with the bad. That there's circumstances where it's good to be strange, right? And to think, and to say things that other people are like, what what did you just say? And it's I mean, it is, I guess, I mean, this sounds um puffed up in a way I don't mean it to, because but it is, I mean, prophets, right? And I don't mean I can tell the future or anything like that, but prophets are people who can accurately assess the world around them and describe it powerfully in ways that communicate, right? That's what I would say the role of a prophet has always been, thousands of years, every culture. And there are tons of them, right? But prophets also get thrown into cisterns, yeah, because they tell the king what the king doesn't want to hear. It's, Balaam tries to curse the Israelites, but Yahweh won't let him do it. And like, he could have everything. He could have, he could have a house. He could have riches. He could have servants if he would just curse the Israelites. And Yahweh says, nope, can't do it. And so he has to doom himself by continually saying the thing that even he wouldn't choose to say. Right. That is, it's not like I'm sort of standing on truth and I'm going to tell you what's wrong with this place. It's that I have a, it's, like I say, a gift or a curse of saying, what it occurs to me to say without much of a filter and without much of a, without much sense of the consequences. I'm very frequently surprised, that people are either, are moved in a good way by what I say or are insulted and, hurt or think I've said something quite rude. It's I don't have a lot of intentionality in that way. And I think, and so in that way, I think I am, part of a long prophetic tradition, right? Prophet simply meaning prophani, somebody who speaks for his age, someone who just simply tells the stories of what he sees around him. So I hope that doesn't sound like I'm calling myself some supernatural being or something. But
Mhm.
prophets very seldom.
Unless you are.
Well, it'd be,
I don't know.
well, yeah, no, I'm fine by me. I mean that, but but prophets. It's not like everybody's just thrilled, right? When Jeremiah shows up, right? Everybody's like, oh God, Jeremiah's here. Like, this guy always says something bad.
Now, I don't want to assume, but I am growing up in West Virginia and having a family that it sounds like made their living, working the land and raising animals,
Mhm.
perhaps dairy,
Yep.
so cows, maybe goats. I shouldn't assume that.
Goats came later, but yeah,
Did
it
they?
was initially yeah, Holsteins.
Yeah. So your interaction with that tension between how you were raised and then how you decide the choices you then made from there. How did religion factor into being strange or being counterculture?
Yeah, my family, we were strange for the area because my parents were Episcopalian, right? And the dominant strain of Christianity in the Greenbrier Valley was Baptist, generally speaking. There was sort of the town elites were Methodist. They went to Old Stone Methodist Church, which we called Old Stern. And so, I grew up with, sort of conventional Episcopal um, training. I have remained a Christian, although I'm an unchurched Christian,
Hmm.
or I am what do they call it? A congregation of one,
Ah, mhm.
or something like that. So I have the same religious faith, but it's much more biblical. I mean, I try as hard as I can to read a significant chunk from the Bible every day, to
Mm,
read through the Bible, fully, every year,
yeah.
or as close as I can come. But I don't read it as a scholar, right? I'm not studying the Bible. I know sort of random stuff from it because I've read it a lot of times. Sort of the same way I know lots of random stuff from Lord of the Rings. I'm not studying it. I'm reading it and trying to, imagine myself in those situations and what does this say about who God is, right? That there's such a wide range, right? There's the God who says, kill everybody in that city. In the Old Testament, in the New Testament, there's a God who says, kill no one. And in fact, if you think about killing someone, you've as good as committed murder. And that's you talk about tension,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
And so there's the tension there just within the religion, and then there's the tension that I am unchurched. I haven't. I've never found an organized church that was particularly satisfactory. And then there's the fact that I'm in the academy, which is at least on the surface and at least in what it states, completely secular,
mm,
right? And often actually antagonistic to confessing Christians. And so so I'm sort of on the outs there as well.
hmm. When you say the academy, you mean academia?
Yeah, academia,
Okay.
the
I
higher
was like,
higher higher
which
education.
academy?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
got
no, yeah, sorry, no, yeah, the Hogwarts.
yeah, I know. I kind of
Yeah,
went
yeah,
there.
no. Yeah, just academia, the academic world.
Got it.
Intellectuals tend to pride themselves on their ability not to believe in superstition and so on and so forth. And I've never. I love superstition. Like I love, and
Mm,
not just my own superstition, right? love other people's superstitions. I'll listen to, if you're Zoroastrian, outstanding. Let's, tell me everything about it. I love conspiracy theories. I love stories of aliens.
Yeah.
And if it's got a plot and it's got characters, then I'm in. I don't really categorize literature. I mean, that was the other thing about my parents' home was like there were paperbacks, sort of, Jaws, sitting right next to a paperback of stories about the cavalry, right, in the West in the 19th century, right next to Rabelais, right? And so I had no I was not told this is good literature, this is bad literature, this is junk, this is entertaining.
Mm,
And so I didn't grow up with those sorts of categories in my head. The category, the only category that mattered to me was the category of, is it interesting? Is it exciting?
mm,
Would I like to live there? Would I like to live in that world? And so, yeah, so I escaped, as it seems to me, I escaped the trap of thinking that literary fiction is proper fiction and proper for academia and proper for study, and that all this this science fiction stuff or this fantasy stuff is, oh, it's kid stuff, and why would we pay attention to that? And it's like, well,
mhm,
kid stuff pretty important, right? Like we
mhm.
all were, and presumably we hope that the ones we're bringing up are going to have wide imaginations and crazy dreams and that sort of thing.
As I think about people listening and thinking about what people are hiring for, I wonder where you would put imagination. I just yesterday went on a walk with my partner. He likes to walk listening to things, and I like to just walk. And I like to also be better than him. And so I had just read an article that said something to the effect of like, if you're walking listening to something, you're missing out on awe, and awe is really important. And I agree, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so how do we help raise the, I don't know, like you mentioned, fun is a non-negotiable, imagination, awe. People might listening might say, well, it's easy for Pinckney to say, like, look where he works, look what he does.
Oh
I
well,
work
but
at an S&P 500. You know what
no,
I mean?
I mean, but that's a misconception. Like universities are not full of
Yes.
imaginative people in the way you would wish, and creative writing programs are strangely conservative, and I don't mean that in a political or really even a pejorative way. They're just people in creative writing programs, particularly graduate programs, are some of the most careful people I've ever met in my life.
Mm.
They write like old people make love, as my dad would have said. It's a very cautious affair. I have a student of mine, a very good writer, who's now a professor at Kaskaskia College. He and I started here. He was an MFA student, and I was a first year faculty member here at the same time. He's kid from Kentucky, working class, no, like no kind of presumption or anything. But he was coming in, and his wife said to him the night before he went, came to his first MFA workshop. She was like, imagine, this is a creative writing workshop. These are going to be the most imaginative, like wild, strange thinkers you've ever met in your life. And he walked in, and like MFA classes are much more like church, than they are like the kind of freewheeling debate and laughter and that kind of thing. It's kind of weird to me, right? Like nobody's ever going to do close reading of your work. If you get trained as a writer, writing for people who do close reading, then you're not writing for more than a dozen people, right? I mean, it's people, people aren't going to read your work that way. You're not going to have those aren't audiences that exist. And what people want is exactly what you said, right? They want awe, they want pleasure, they want enjoyment, they want change. And it's why our literature, I mean, it seems sort of sad to me right now, right? I mean, I end up reading a lot of stuff I read as a kid and a lot of 19th century, work, and even going back to 18th century British novels and stuff like that, or Cervantes, just because I get tired of this very tame, non um, right, non superstitious, yeah, like no good character is a Christian who believes fervently in the risen Christ, right? That person is always sort of a crazy person on the periphery who is not to be sympathized with. No, religion, I mean, it's a sort of regurgitation of a contemporary academic worldview. And I mean, I'm not even 19th century. I'm like probably from an ice age or something like that in terms of what I like and what entertains me. And like Snorri Sturluson, right? The Norse Eddas. It's like what I think like 15th century Viking story.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Like they're not sort of stories about angst as you sit in your apartment and contemplate like your ecological footprint, right? I mean, these are stories of dudes who are walking around with axes and and but I mean, it's not like, oh, Snorri Stolsten, what a jerk. Like we don't like him. He voted for Trump. It's like this is foundational to like Norse identity, you know, so it's like it's not trivial. This is a foundational document, and so anyway, so I tend to read much older stuff that I don't sort of feel the taint of um, sort of contemporary literary society, which seems paltry to me a lot of the time. So which is weird. So I read all this old stuff, but now I'm running this lab where we're doing AI, we're doing gamification, and stuff like that. So I love that feeling that I just don't live anywhere. I'm half the time I'm in science fiction, and half the time I'm on a long ship in the North Atlantic, and that's great. Like
Yeah.
I don't have to declare allegiance to any sort of trivial contemporary artistic style or preference or anything like that. It also means I don't sell very many books, right? Like I mean, I mean, I'm
Right.
writing I'm writing for a very small audience as a general rule. So.
Emily's conversation with Pinckney Benedict will continue after a short break.
Pinckney would like to spotlight the Center for Virtual Expression at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. The center began as a virtual reality lab dedicated to the innovation of storytelling. CVEX, as it is now affectionately known, has expanded into, you guessed it, artificial intelligence with partners in medicine, music, journalism, and much more.
At CVEX, we're way ahead of the curve on this stuff. We're way ahead of the curve of teaching undergraduates that AI is going to be a significant part of their lives. It's not going to be banned after they get out of college. And so, how do you ethically use what is essentially now a superpower? How do you decide where it's appropriate to use it and where it's inappropriate to use it? And then we not only give them that framework, but then we put them in touch directly with the best AIs that are available now. It doesn't matter how rich you are, you can't get a better AI than the one we sit them down. They get as good as you could get if you walked into an AI lab at Harvard. That's the weight class I want to be in. I want to be punching with the best. And at CVEX, we definitely are.
Get to know the many projects born at the Center for Virtual Expression at cvex.ai. I was thinking about, well, I just had like 12 thoughts at once. Does that ever happen to you?
That is my constant state.
Yeah, good. Me too. I was thinking about how it makes you, having the context, right, of thinking back to the 15th century and then perhaps reading something that's come out in the last year and being able to, sort of see the through lines. I mean, part of what I experience in my own life is like, there's like, and maybe you call it the 10 Commandments, maybe you don't, but there's only so much wisdom, right? And it's just get
Mhm.
to it
Right.
however the hell you're gonna get to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
and Todd was telling me, that you find research makes you ecstatic, like it's, and I get that. And I think it's the invitation of this podcast is like, why the hell would anyone, no offense, but like listen to Pinckney Benedict that doesn't know Pinckney Benedict or does.
Hey, believe me, it astonishes every day I wake up and I'm like, the other thing is constant imposter syndrome, no
Sure,
matter what I do. Imposter
sure.
syndrome as a writer, imposter syndrome as a professor, imposter syndrome as an AI consultant or whatever I am, virtual reality. Nothing seems real to me in a way. You talked about the continuum, right? And there really is. Like I start almost every class I ever teach at the Epic of Gilgamesh, right, which is the earliest piece of sort of superhero fiction that we have, and and it is. It's I mean, it has way more in common with the Marvel Cinematic Universe than it does with the latest novel that was published by Houghton Mifflin, right, or Knopf. And being able to talk to my students often, and now my undergraduates have read, by comparison to what undergraduates 10 years ago or 20 years ago or in my time, right, have read. And again, this is not invidious, it's just descriptive, right, because my students are smart and canny and they avoid boring stuff, right, and I'm like, more power to you. I wish I'd had more gumption when I was younger and just said, "This is dull. Stop." But they don't have a broad literary background. They haven't read very much. The only thing that I can, and thank God for this, the only thing that I can reliably count on is Harry Potter. And and that's a, I mean, if you want to know about literature, right, that's, I don't waste that, it's probably 8 or 9 thousand pages. Like it's a, if you take it as one narrative, right, that's a huge body of literature. And it develops and changes, like um but if I but I start talking about ancient literature and you could just see them go brrrt, because ancient people are wicked and ignorant and da da da. And then, but then, you sort of, get them into the Epic of Gilgamesh and you're like, yeah, it's like a big guy who's a god, kind of a Thor figure or whatever. And then it's Enkidu, who's his little like werewolf buddy, and it's a buddy movie and they run around and Gilgamesh says, "Don't worry, little buddy. When we go fight Humbaba, I'll take care of you." And
It's like
yeah,
Guardians. Yeah.
that's
I
right.
love
So
that.
yeah, so yeah, I mean, so it's a buddy movie.
Mhm,
It's a superhero comic.
mhm.
It's all the things that literature has always been. But the academy, well, again, academia, university, and I'm speaking in too broad a generalization, but it has a problem with that, right? Like there's a um, because they're all such good civilized people, and I don't say that ironically. Like they really are good civilized people. The problem is, like, literature is not a civilized thing, or it should not be, or at least maybe domesticated is a better word. Although, I mean, barbarians produce some really cool stories, but it is not, it should not be tamed. And I feel like it, to a certain extent, the literature that we are given now has been tamed, it has been housebroken. And that seems like a real shame and a loss to me. But then again, I'm old and will die soon, and so like that, I'll be gone from the culture, and nobody will have to feel bad about my disappointment in their reading choices.
I love that the sound clip there, as you said, "I'll die soon," and I laughed. But
Well,
in any
I mean, I
case,
hope it was funny.
we'll
Like
do something with it.
okay, okay, good.
So I was, we're going to get to the Center for Virtual Expression
Oh yeah,
because,
sure.
everyone in my world is like AI, right? We all want to talk about it, or do we? But we do. But we'll get to
Well, we
that.
all want to talk about how awful it is, right?
Correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You had mentioned, that your MFA students, you witnessed them uh, kind of living through this like careful, cautious affair of getting an MFA, and that you're trying to do something about it, like make it less cautious, take risks. I know that's a big thing that's important to you. Part of what was coming up for me, so I googled, or I looked you up just to see like what podcasts you'd been on, to hear your voice. I like to just listen to people's voices before I meet them. And there was this one podcast, a student you had in 2019, I don't know if you remember this, where you said you're gonna create a podcast, and she recorded 1 minute and one episode, right? But what I was laughing about Tolkien, and what I was laughing about was just like that. I don't know how y'all got to that place. I don't even know if she's an MFA student. It doesn't matter. But I want to hear more about like that. To me, that invitation from a professor to like go do a podcast, go read Norse literature, go, all these sort of invitations to stop being so prescriptive with how you're going to do this feels really audacious. And my question for you is like, what else is a way that Pinckney Benedict is trying to do something about this careful, cautious way students approach their learning?
Well, I mean, I try, even in my person, right? I mean, every professor is also an actor. I mean, either a good actor, or poor actor, or whatever. But right, so my persona, the persona that I bring to class, I try to make sure that it's a persona that isn't like, you know, um, where I try as hard as I can, do not always succeed, obviously, but that I actually, when I ask for something outrageous, when I'm actually given something outrageous, I don't react, in an outraged way, right? I don't want my students to feel like I'm tricking them. I'm saying write something really audacious and offensive, and then they do, and I'm like, you're a
I knew
monster.
it.
Yeah, right, exactly, exactly. This should. I mean, but my invitation to my students, all my students, my undergraduates and my graduate students, is that I want them to write in such a way that, like I'm shocked and freaked out and have to question my pedagogy, right? Like I want them to write something that makes me think, "Ooh, maybe complete freedom really is too much," because that's an edge I'm very interested to find out if it exists. And so far, nobody's ever done that. I mean, I have been genuinely shocked and pleased, but also, horrified and that kind of thing. But nobody yet has made me think, oh, this should not have been written. Like I should have, a priori, I should have told them they can't do this. I've never had to add that line to my syllabus that says you have complete freedom here except for whatever. Um, and that's, and I tell them very clearly, like, I don't care all that much about, sort of style or, whatever. Like, maybe I have a style as a prose writer. To me, it just seems like I'm just writing down what things look like and smell like and sound like and how they affect the character. But like what I care about is story, and story for me is always about change, right? Story is always about going from being hungry to being satisfied, or from being from being humiliated to being joyous, from being a king to being a slave, right? Like those are the changes I'm interested in. I don't much care how they're expressed, or I mean, even if they're poorly punctuated, right? Like, I'd rather read a poorly punctuated story that's interesting than this sort of perfect, like miniaturist piece that doesn't have any narrative interest. Because, to go back to AI, right? AI will fix all that for like, if if your high school or middle school or whatever has not taught you how to punctuate, and apparently they don't teach that anymore, well, AI is here to take up the slack. Like, I never have to read a badly punctuated uh, manuscript again, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's stick with change. Yeah. I mean, I'm having so many connection points in my head talking to you, but I think the application of like what we want, right? All these juicy feelings and this like luscious life and this ability to it's all sort of like to me embodied and feeling and like, this shit people hate to talk about.
Hmm.
But as a fiction writer, as a professor, and then the director, the admin job of the Center of Virtual Expression, by the way, at SIU Carbondale, which Southern Illinois University, for those of you who don't know.
Everybody knows, go dogs.
Right. It's this
That's, yeah, the Salukis,
Salukis. Yeah,
baby.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hey,
yeah, yeah.
we're world famous.
Truly. Truly. And so I wonder, right? Part of me feels like AI, of course you'd be thinking and talking about it, you the man.
Hmm.
Because of who you are, your proclivity. And by the way, poking into the corners of it, because it's not like what Pinckney doesn't love is a binary. So it's not good or bad, right? Like,
Right.
let's make it more nuanced. But yeah, tell us a little bit about like, right, if we all want change and change
Hmm.
is what we want to read about and it's
Right.
juicy, um, why is AI so scary for us if we want change?
Well, I mean, I think it is partly it is that the few things. Part of it is ignorance, I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, ignorance for me is not a pejorative. It's
Hmm.
just a state, and it's always addressable if you care to address it. Right?
Hmm.
Stupidity is a problem, but ignorance is no problem at all. I'm ignorant about almost everything.
Hmm.
But it's ignorance, and it's ignorance born of the as a person who's been using AI personally and in my classes for 3.5 years now, right? So I was in the early days when it was really rough, right? And I really did have to question my sanity. I'm like, this is so bad. But I knew that it was the worst it was ever going to be.
Mm.
And all it was going to do was get better,
Mm.
or at least more capable, right? If we're going to stay away from a simple good bad dichotomy, it was going to be more effective, and it was going to have more utility. Um, and but in that time, the reporting that I've seen on artificial intelligence, which first of all is just a terrible term for it, call it. I have a partner who calls it augmented intelligence, because it's not that it's
Mm.
artificially intelligence; it's that it augments human intelligence, right?
Mm.
And that's a much better way to think about it, because it's not intelligent, and it's right. Like, and I don't know why we would use that word, and it gives people such odd expectations.
Mm.
They go, well, it's limited, it's flawed. It's like, oh, so you're saying it's human,
Oh, yeah.
right? It's that's I don't know anybody who isn't limited and flawed, and tosses up, barfs up biased opinions and incorrect assumptions, and so on and so forth. So if we're going to hold that against AI, then we need to pillory ourselves as well. So,
Mhm.
but the public discourse about it has been so sensational and so bad and so uninformative, because I think it's by people who feel threatened. Right? I
Mhm.
mean, this thing can write, and I'll tell you, as a writing teacher, like, it doesn't write as well as I do. In terms of like literature, it doesn't write as well as most of the writers I know, but it writes at least as well as almost all the non-writers I know.
Mm.
in terms of sending me an email or writing a letter or, putting together a proposal. And I use it all the time. I use AI all day long, to write. I use it to, put together, as I say, I use it to put together proposals. I use it to put together, any kind of document that is not a work of art. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I use it to make pictures. I use it to make songs. These are things that I couldn't do before. But there's a, Wagner. My daughter's an opera singer, so despite my protestations and inclinations, I ended up learning some about opera. She was educated, and Wagner has a term. Well, I guess it was a term before he used it, but he used it, codified it, called Gesamtkunstwerk,
Mm.
which just means the total work of art, the entire work of art. And it's this idea that the entire work of art, um, it all comes from one source and it all leads to one place, right? This sort of unified thing that it's impossible to imagine uh, actually achieving Gesamtkunstwerk without without owning the means of production,
Mm.
right? Without being able to do or direct or, right. And I can't hire a bunch of people who have to do what I say,
Mm-hmm.
but I can use a bunch of AIs to create the things, or at least very close to the things that I want. And, I've worked with visual AIs, text to image AIs a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's way cheaper than hiring, hiring an illustrator, and they get it right at least as much as human illustrators do, right? I mean, it's not like a human illustrator just nails on the head what I'm after, and an AI gets about 2/3 of it. I mean, again, it's like, well, I'm sorry.
Mm.
Like, I wish I had $1 million to hire everybody, but I don't, and I'm much more interested in achieving the effect I want to achieve than worrying about like union pay rates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, it's I'm interested in it because of the efficiencies, and uh, it makes me more productive, and it makes me productive in ways that I couldn't have been productive 6 months ago in many
Mm-hmm.
cases.
Mm-hmm. To me, I would love to hear your sort of looking forward and the futurist mindset. But before I do that, I think what in the future, right, as people are continuing to do what we do, which is adapt, sometimes is at alarming rates. It seems to me that the invitation is to, as it is for yourself, you're not asking people to do anything you're not doing, which is, in some ways diversify the inputs, right? Like,
Right.
and listening to this episode of Who's Missing hopefully is one way people can be like, yeah, it's scary, it's terrifying, oh wait, it's interesting, it's
Of course
efficient,
it
yeah.
is.
So tell
It wouldn't be worth doing if it weren't terrifying.
exactly.
Yeah, right? Going into
Yes.
outer space is terrifying, right?
Yes.
Driving the first car must have been. Can you imagine
No.
being the first person who went faster than like 30 miles an hour? Right? Like, yeah. I mean, it's all terrifying. And that's how or it's at least an indicator, right? Not everything terrifying is worthwhile and revelatory. But anything that you're doing that isn't terrifying doesn't have the possibility of revelation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, or at
Mm-hmm.
least that would be my, that's my philosophy. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sitting there going like, I am out of my mind, like when I put this out, when I talk about this, it's going to ruin me. It's going to ruin my career. Everybody I know, like if I don't feel that fear, then I'm not saying anything that's worth saying, right?
Yeah.
Like if I sit down with you and I tell myself, oh, I'm a Christian, you know what I mean? Oh yeah, but I don't know about, I don't know about the, people who do podcasts that, they're intellectuals. They don't, da, 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 right. And I'm like, and there are people who will hear that I'm a confessing Christian and they will not hear anything
That's
else I
right.
have to
Yeah.
say. Like that'll be an off switch, but it's still right. So it's scary, right? It's scary to say that. It's scary to say, yeah, contemporary literature kind of, turns my off switch. Like and again, that's overbroad, but
Mm-hmm.
but that's what tells me, okay, I've got to say that, right? Like I've got to, I've been, and first of all, I mean, I didn't just bring it up, right? Like I was asked about my religion. And in
Mhm.
fact, my religion teaches me, if you say, what about religion? And I go, oh, I can take it or leave it. Da, 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 da. It's like, no, I love Jesus. I mean, I've got to say that, or I don't love Jesus,
Mm,
right? And
mm,
so, but it's a scary thing to say, but I think that's a pretty good place to be as an artist, as a thinker, a public intellectual, if that's what I am.
mm,
Is right, is like, if I'm not saying something that is going to turn whole swaths of people off, and if
mhm,
I'm not saying something that I'm scared to say because I don't want people to be mad at me,
mhm,
like I
mhm,
don't enjoy that, I don't like it, right? And if my work is the same way, if I'm not if as I'm typing, I'm not like, oh man, like, you take a big chance with a piece of vocabulary, you know what I mean? Like, oh, nobody's going to know what that word means, but it's exactly the right word. I forget what movie it was we were watching the other night, and my family, my son, my wife, and me, and somebody used the word gonif, and I was like, man, I haven't heard the word gonif in decades, right?
yeah.
And the only place I could remember the word gonif was in Mad Magazine, like when I was a teenager. But what a great word. But I guarantee that most people who hear the word, not that, oh, it's so impressive, I know the word gonif, but it's like,
Mhm.
it was the right word, so you use it even if nobody's going to understand it, or it's an old word, it's an old fashioned word. I think like it's Yiddish. And so anyway, that's, if it's not risky, then I might as well be taking a nap, I guess is what I'm saying.
And look, no shade on naps. We love them.
No, 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 no,
And
no.
you must
Lo, I
nap.
love naps. Yeah, no, I love
What
naps.
if that's
I'm
the
I'm
headline
just
from
saying,
this?
like,
Pinckney hates naps. People might
let's
click
see,
on
then
that.
I'm really being risky.
I
Although,
know.
as a society, we seem to think naps are, like, we're so crazy for productivity and like putting in the hours and being in the office, and
Totally.
and it's like, are you kidding?
Right?
Like, everybody should just take a nap. Like, I
Yeah.
bet I bet our politics would be smooth as butter if you just said, everybody right now, everybody's yelling at everybody else, just go take
Yeah. There's
it.
nothing there's
And
nothing a
then a
nap
couple
can't
hours
fix.
later, we come in, we share a pizza, and all is well. But
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Naps are one of life's great privileges and
Mm,
pleasures.
so good. Thank you. God, what a great place to end. Naps are like, I mean, I feel like so much of what you've talked about today is like, all the things we used to do as kids. Can we still keep doing them? Please have fun, take naps, think about the future.
Absolutely.
Pinckney, thank you so much for the giggles.
Oh, my pleasure. You're very, very pleasing to have a conversation with. I enjoy it.
Thank you, listener, and thank you, Pinckney Benedict, for this incredible adventure we had on this week's Who's Missing episode. If you have someone in mind who could use a little bit of cognitive stretch, don't keep this episode to yourself. Share it and allow it to inspire others in your life. And thank you for listening. Imagine that, cars can fly. Yeah, my dad always thought he would live to see the day, right? The Jetsons.
You know, I am totally with your dad. I am outraged.
Outraged.
Where is that? This was one of the promises, right?